Welcome to the Sending Your Senior podcast. My name is Clay Carino, and I serve as a college pastor here at Biltmore Church. And our hope for this podcast is to help equip parents on how to handle some of the unique challenges that come as they are sending their seniors out into the next season of life. And I'm so excited to be joined here with James and Susan Andrews. James and Susan, I would love if you guys would just tell us a little bit about yourselves, kind of what you do for a living, how many kids you have, what are their ages, just help us get to know you a little bit.
Hey Clay, thanks for having us. James Andrews, I'm an internal medicine physician and been in Nashville for 26 years. Susan is a stay-at-home mom and is now a servant leader of Bible Study Fellowship, where she serves/volunteers many hours, sometimes has more stress than I have during the week. Until our boys?
Yes, we have Jake, who is, he graduated from Georgia Tech and stayed in Atlanta. He works there as an engineer. And then Jonathan, who is going to graduate from Liberty University in 10 days. So I was asking, yeah, we're excited about that.
Then we had two other college experiences, Clay. We had a missionary kid. The parents are in Thailand, and he came and lived with us during his college career. And then had a foster child that we had for a couple of years, and then he went to public university in North Carolina and then ended it in public university in South Carolina. So very different careers for all of it.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest challenges I think that parents kind of face is this transition as their little boys and girls who they have watched grow up and clothed, provided for, been there for, and years and years and years of these experiences with. There's this shift that I think what leaves parents kind of asking the question of now what? It's been 18 years roughly. Of parenting one way, and then it kind of changes. And so what we want to do in this podcast is just kind of delve into some of those nuances and kind of what you guys have learned and what your experiences have been, just to try to help parents. And so for this episode, we will talk about two topics, and it'll be kind of the heart of the parent. We want to help equip the parent on how to process the different emotions and thoughts and feelings that come along with this, and then also talk about what we're just going to call the shift. And it's from control as parent into coach as parent. And so, Susan, I'd love if you would just start us off kind of talking a little bit about what were some of the feelings that you were having, what were some of the emotions or thoughts, especially with the first one, kind of going off to college. What was that like for you?
If there is an emotion to have, I had it. It was like a time of mourning for me. And, he wasn't going away forever, but it felt like his childhood was dying, or the part of me that was that mom. Even though I had another son at home that still needed all that attention, just to think of him leaving, that I wouldn't know every meal that he was eating. I wouldn't know, had he had a vegetable this week, where he would be at night, and it was really hard for me. And I had all the feels. There were a lot of tears, sometimes in the middle of the grocery store. It was hard to not put that on Jake, as he was all excited to go off to college and have this new adventure, and he had his own probably fears and doubts, but for me to not put mine onto him was something that I thought was really important for me.
Yeah. James, what about you? What were some of that?
It's hard. I mean, if you're honest, the only way I could handle it, think about it, was chapters in a book. That chapter had closed, and there was a definite sadness the day you drop them off. The drive home is really quiet. Yep. And the more parents I talk to, the more common that is. And so now we try to call parents when we know they've dropped their child off, because it's a hard ride home. Yeah. A lot of thoughts racing through your mind at that time.
So you guys are kind of processing what this feels like, this new chapter that you're entering into, kind of as you got down the road a little bit and from the initial impact or feelings, whatever, wave, I guess. What were some of the things that you kind of started to cling on to or wrestled with? Maybe there were some scriptures, maybe there were just some truths that, you're praying for your child, but also that you were having to wrestle through in your own heart that were really helpful. Was there anything like that for you guys?
Yeah, so the scripture we clung to a lot was obviously do not be anxious about anything, and I think a lot of times we stop there, but with prayer and petition and with thanksgiving, and so a lot of it was being thankful for the days we had, thankful for the memories. I always say if you're sad, then something good happened, and so we're sad because we were missing him, but we were so excited for what God was doing, and I think we shifted our focus it wasn't about us. As much as we wanted, it's our sadness, our loss, but we were releasing a son into the world, and we wanted him to do what God had called him to do. And the last thing we wanted to do was be an anchor to that. And so we wanted to encourage him and pray and petition the Lord and be thankful that he was able to have these opportunities to do this.
I was going to say, it is a command, do not worry or be anxious. But he does tell us how, and that is through prayer. And so anytime I would be tempted to be afraid for him or worry or be anxious, to pray or ask someone else to pray for me in that, so that I could release that and trust that God was taking care of him.
I often hear parents kind of with this wrestling of like, you have been entrusted with them, and it is your job for the early part of their lives to protect them and look out for them. But then there's this wrestling, kind of what you guys were saying, of Lord, they're yours, and I'm gonna trust you with that. And it's not necessarily easy; it's not that black and white. But did you guys find any help in community with that processing? And how did biblical community help you shoulder some of that wrestling that you were going through?
Talking to other parents that have been through it. And again, I have a very strong prayer group that I love, and I knew that they were praying for Jake, for us, for Jonathan, his little brother. And so that was a real comfort to me and gave me a lot of peace. What would you say?
Same thing. As always, trying to have men that are 10 steps ahead of me that I could call and say, hey, what do you do with this? And here's what I'm struggling with. And they would talk me down off the ledge and encourage me. And then, again, trying to flip that around and do the same for others when we saw them experiencing that same angst.
Yeah. So you guys really found kind of an outlet into, not necessarily onto the child, but into the friendships that you kind of had.
Yes.
Really a support system for you guys. Is kind of going off that, what practical advice would you give parents as they're wrestling with, because it's a journey. There's going to be there's going to be the lead up, and then there's they've moved out, and then a lot of other things that come from that. And so is there any practical, tangible advice that you would give them on just that process?
One thing was, we took the energy and put it back into the kids that were at home, and because you are anxious, and that relationship changes, right? Because you always had sometimes we'd have a table of 6, and now we're down to a table of 1 child, and to put that energy and enjoy that, and say, wow, now we have the one-on-one, and now we can pour into him completely, and so that became a really nice channeling for us to love on John.
It's important to remember that the other siblings are going through their own sort of loss, or maybe they're thrilled, but the idea is that their world is changing too, and they need to know where they are in that, what's safe. And so I think for me, the most important thing was that I didn't put my angst onto my kids. I went to other moms, or I talked to him, or I just, cried out to God so that I could deal with those emotions, but not burden my kid with that.
Yeah.
And along with that, the practical advice of, it's a tough world, I think we all agree with that. And so the last thing we want to do is put the anxieties on them. And to remind, in this case, Jake, of saying, hey man, I don't care if you're the CEO of IBM, or you're straight A's, or you graduated from Georgia Tech with honors, man. I'd rather you come home and be a man who loves the Lord than to, quote, be a success in the world's eyes, and just take that pressure off of them, because the world is putting so much pressure on these kids on and on to, quote, succeed in the worldly manners, but just continue to remind them who they are, and that it's way greater than any college degree or associate degree or job or anything of that nature. And so I think that was our practical advice, to keep trying to let off that steam instead of, hey bud, how are the grades? Are you doing? Why'd you do this?
And that there's a temptation to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you've had so much control for so long.
And you want good for them.
Yes,
them to succeed.
absolutely. And we know best. If they would just listen. But you have to trust that you have done everything you could to that point, and that they are ready. And if they're not, then just pray harder, because at that point your job is done, and you've done what you could. Now, who they are in Christ is where they have to step out from that now.
Nothing else in the world's going to tell about, right? I mean, there are very few things, right? If they have a campus ministry or a church that they're going to join, but nothing else is going to tell them who they are in the Lord and encourage them in that. And so we saw that as our job, just to keep gently reminding the simple things.
Yes. And be grateful anytime they called or texted, instead of saying, oh, I haven't talked to you in so long. Just absorb all of that. If they call at 11:30 p.m. and you have to work in the morning, you sit up and text the call, and just because that's when they're ready to talk and you want to hear. So,
no, I think that's great. And I can hear you guys kind of touching on a little bit of kind of what we want to talk about in the second part of this is this shift from, okay, you had control over what they were going to eat. You had control over, to some degree, maybe who they were hanging out with, or at least influences. You got to speak into those things. And now you're entering into a season of parenting where you're more of a coach. And James, you said something to me last week when we were talking about this that I thought was so good, and I would love if you would just kind of unpack it a little bit. You said that any unsolicited advice will feel like criticism. Was that something that you guys kind of learned the hard way, or you kind of knew going in, or how did you?
Yes, fortunately, I learned it the hard way. I read the book afterwards, but I learned on the front side. So the story, Jake was telling me about his weekend coming up, and he's driving here, had to drive through the night, going to this concert, and this kid had to get up, and they had to be home at this time, and then they were going to rush you. They had one more thing they were going to do, and he was going to get home at 2 or 3 a.m., and then he had his big e-contest Monday morning at 8, and I'm just sitting there listening going, well, I think I can fix that. How about we not do this or do this? And so I made one suggestion. So, Jake, how about you just not go to that concert and you come home early? And he, as kindly as he could, he said, Dad, I really wasn't asking for advice. I was just telling you what I was doing. And I can tell you where I was sitting when he said it. And I was like, wow, you are completely right. And I just stepped back. It wasn't an immoral decision. It was just.
And he was very respectful.
He was very respectful. It was not a decision I would make, and I thought I could help him. But he was just sharing with me his life. And so it did help me back up. Later, I did read a book that exactly said what you said, is any unsolicited advice is seen as criticism. And we see that. And the older they get, I can promise you, the more that plays in relationships and soon to be married for these kids. When you start giving advice and they've not asked for it, they do interpret it as criticism. And we can look back in our lives and see, it did feel like criticism, even though our hearts are good and it doesn't matter. And so that really changed the way we tried to speak and have conversations with the kids.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think, and I mean, I could even, this wasn't that long ago for me that I was into college, and there was this like, I'm coming into myself, and I wanted the opportunity to be able to just say, hey, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing. And, I can look back and see that I kind of put my parents in a weird position there where I was not mature enough to see that this is also a transition for them,
yes.
And so I think that I would encourage any, seniors that are going or leaving the house or graduating, whatever. I would encourage you to just take a moment and realize too that your parents are human beings, yes. And they have hearts too. And oftentimes what feels like the criticism is really love. It's just, so you're both kind of navigating this new space. And I think allowing grace for each other will make that a much smoother process and transition. But were there any practical things that you guys kind of tried to do that kind of made this a little bit more of a reality, where, okay, we,
I would say, like one of the difficult things, as hard as it was to send them off the first time, then they come home for Christmas or an extended, visit, and they think they're still at college, and they think they can still come in at 2 a.m, and I think they're my high schooler again, and they're going to be in at 10 o'clock and play family games, and that may not be how they envision it. And so to be able to discuss that without blame or criticism, but to say, hey, we'd like to have a family meal this day, and then if you want to see your friends or whatever Friday, great, but could you be here this night? And to be able to work that out, mutually respectful, really helped us a lot, I think.
I think the other thing is what Susan said. When they call, we stop. When they are home, you don't see them very often. You kind of make that your weekend event of when you get to see them, because again, you get the glimpse that I'm not going to see you very often. So this weekend's important, and we just spend that time and enjoy them. And they come and go very fast. And even when they come home, they go see their friends, which you want to do. So we try to get these little glimpses of time.
Or welcome the friends to the house. And we did that for the new friends that he had made at Georgia Tech. Within a few weeks, we had a get-together where we had him invite his new friends, and it was amazing. And it helped me a lot to have peace about the fact that he had made new friends and that they were good, actually Christian kids that he had met at Cru, one of the ministries there. And so to invite them in and give them a safe place where they can come, I think helped a lot with that relationship.
Yeah, and it helps living in Asheville. People want to come to us.
Exactly. It is true.
We've had houses full of kids on the floors at times. That was great.
So you guys really found it beneficial to kind of allow them to integrate this new kind of thing for them into what once was at home. And you got to kind of see, you got a front row view to who they're hanging out with and what's going on without necessarily intruding.
Yes.
That's great. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for just the input and just the practices, the things you learn, the encouragements, all that kind of stuff. And that's our hope. We hope that this podcast at least starts a conversation, starts some thought processes for you guys on the change is coming. But as you've heard from Jason and Susan, there are good practices that can help this transition for both your senior and for you. So we hope this is encouragement. Thank you so much for watching.